Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch Contenders Roundup. So, the playoffs for Contenders Season 1 2020 are in full swing, and we've got a variety of regions to look at. We've got 4 results from 4 different regions, and then this will be part 1, and part 2 will be at the end of next week, where we will look at the rest of the other regions' results. So, if you're looking for North America, if you're looking for Europe, it's not yet in. So, bad luck. But in this video, let's start off with the Pacific region. So, out of the teams that had been in the Pacific region this season, we saw Talon Esports qualify in first place. It would then be Far East Society, Bayaba, Electric Gaming, UND or Undefined, Lord of Dragon Esports, Green Leaves, and Team for Revenge. So, the playoffs format follows a double bracket format where you have a winner's bracket and a loser's bracket, so you're not automatically out if you lose in the first quarterfinal or the semi-finals or actually even the winner's final, so you always have that second chance. But in the quarterfinal we saw Talon Esports taking on TFR or Team for Revenge. This would be a 3-0 win for Talon Esports, we would kind of expect this. Electric Gaming would take on Undefined, this would be a 3-0 win for Undefined. Far East Society would get a default win against Green Leaves because Green Leaves would forfeit, and Bayaba would get a default win against Lord of Dragon Esports because they would forfeit as well. So Bayaba and Far East Society would move on to the semi-final. In the losers bracket round 1 we saw TFR or Team for Revenge take on Electric Gaming. This would be a 3-0 win for Electric Gaming, and the 2 forfeiters from the quarterfinals, Green Leaves and Lord of Dragon Esports, would take on each other, and this would be a 3-1 win for Lord of Dragon Esports, with them moving on. So, in the semi-final, we saw Talon Esports taking on Undefined. This would be a 3-0 win for Talon, as you would expect. Talon moving on again. Far East Society would take on Bayaba. This would be a 3-1 win for Far East Society. In the losers bracket, Bayaba would come into this. They'd be going up against Electric Gaming. This would be a 3-1 win for Bayaba. And Undefined would take on Lord of Dragon Esports, and it would be a 3-0 for Undefined, with them moving on. In the losers bracket round 3, though, Undefined would take on Bayaba, or they were going to, but Bayaba ended up forfeiting, and I think actually Bayaba is disbanded now, which is very unfortunate, so Undefined would get a spot in that losers bracket final. But to find out who they were facing, we had to have the winners bracket final between Talon Esports and Far East Society, the 2 best teams in this region this year. And Far East Society have won 1 of the 4 weeks, Talon Esports have won 3 of the 4 weeks, and Talon Esports get a 3-0 here over Far East Society. For Talon Esports are very difficult to deal with, shall we say, in the Pacific region. They are very, very dominant, and they are showing it here again. But Far East Society would take on Undefined in that losers bracket final and get a narrow 3-2 win, which means they set up a rematch in the grand final against Talon Esports, and, well, nothing really changed. It was a 4-0 for Talon Esports because the finals are a first to 4. So, yeah, Talon Esports dominated and did not drop a single map during this playoff run in the Pacific region, and they will be taking home the top prize, and they are the Contenders 2020 Season 1 champions of the Pacific, taking home that nice $14,000 and $5,110 will be going to Far East Society, and Bayaba and Undefined would each get $3,745. Moving on to South America though, and in South America we saw Dignity come in as the #1 seed, just ahead of Endese, and Endese had actually really broken through this year, so very, very interesting. Then we would see Warpigs, Petitos, Capybara Esports, Upgaming, Pacific Ocelots, and Betrayed. So, in the quarterfinals we saw Dignity take on Betrayed. This would be a 3-0 win for Dignity, no surprises there. Petitos would take on Capybara Esports. This would be a 3-1 win for Capybara Esports, which is a tiny bit of an upset because Petitos were a higher seeded team. Endese would take on Pacific Ocelots. This would be a 3-0 win for Endese, no surprises there. And Warpigs would take on Upgaming, and no surprises here that Warpigs get a 3-0 victory. In the losers bracket round 1, we saw Petitos taking on Betrayed. Petitos would get a 3-0 win here, and Upgaming would take on Pacific Ocelots, and it would be a 3-1 win for the Ocelots. So, winners bracket semi-final, we saw Dignity taking on Capybara Esports. Again, a 3-0 for Dignity, no surprises there. And Endese would take on Warpigs. Now, a little bit closer, but it's a 3-1 for Endese. Warpigs are slightly better than some of the other people in this competition, but Endese are better than Warpigs, so they both move on. In the losers bracket round 2, we saw Warpigs taking on Petitos. This would be a 3-0 win for Warpigs, showing their slightly better class, And then Capybara Esports will take on Pacific Ocelots, and this will be a 3-1 win for Pacific Ocelots. In the losers bracket round 3, we saw Warpigs taking on Pacific Ocelots. Once again, Warpigs would get the 3-0 victory. So, this set up the finals, sort of. So, the winners bracket final would be Dignity taking on Adese, and Dignity will get a 3-0 win here. And Dignity follow a similar trend in this playoff to what Talon did in the one we just looked at. So, spoiler alert, there you go. Losers bracket final though, and we see Adese take on Warpigs. This time around, because this is a rematch of the winners bracket semi-final, that this actually goes a different way. Very close match, but Warpigs get a 3-2 victory, knocking out Adese. And Dignity would get the pleasure of taking on Warpigs in the grand final, and it would be a 4-0 for Dignity. So, Dignity, again, didn't lose a single map during these playoffs. Very, very interesting. Both Talon and Dignity are unbeaten in their playoff runs. Super duper interesting. Super interesting. But Dignity are the champions of Contenders 2020 Season 1 in South America, and will take home the same prize money as we went through just now with Talon Esports. But now we will move on to Australia. This is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So, in Australia, we saw Ground Zero Gaming come in as the #1 seed, Mindfreak, Signy Drop Bears, Warriors Esports, Paradigm Shift, Scrimbucks, Atletico Esports, and ADSL2+. So, this is slightly interesting because Ground Zero Gaming are kind of a new sort of thing, or not a new thing. That's wrong. But they haven't ever won one of these competitions. But they've signed a lot from previous rosters that have been very dominant in Australia. So it was interesting to see if Ground Zero Gaming could make that count with the experience they had on the roster, let's say. But in the quarterfinals, we saw Ground Zero Gaming taking on ADSL2+. This would be an expected 3-0 win for Ground Zero Gaming. Warriors Esports would take on Paradigm Shift. This would be a 3-1 win for Warriors Esports. Mindfreak would take on Atletico Esports, and Mindfreak would get the 3-0 win. Mindfreak arguably the second best team in the region. Sydney Drop Bears would take on the Scrimbucks, and this would be a 3-0 win for Sydney Drop Bears. In the losers bracket round 1, we saw ADSL2+ taking on Paradigm Shift. This would be a 3-0 win for Paradigm Shift. And Atletico Esports would take on Scrimbucks, and it would be a 3-0 win for Scrimbucks. In the winners bracket semi-final, we saw Ground Zero Gaming taking on Warriors Esports. Once again, Ground Zero Gaming will get a nasty 3-0 victory here. Again, looking like a good team. Mindfreak would take on Sydney Drop Bears. Now, this is a lot closer because these two teams are much more evenly matched. And Sydney Drop Bears take a 3-2 victory over Mindfreak, which is a tiny bit of an upset. But super duper interesting. There's some really close matches in this region. But in the losers bracket round 2, Mindfreak would take on Paradigm Shift, and Mindfreak would show their class and get a 3-0 victory here. Warriors Esports would get a 3-1 victory over Scrimbucks as well. This would set up a losers bracket round 3 of Mindfreak versus Warriors. This again would be a 3-0 for Mindfreak, looking very good at this point. In the winners bracket final, we saw Ground Zero Gaming taking on the Signy Drop Bears. This is again a really narrow one. First team to really test this Ground Zero Gaming side this season, I would say. But a 3-2 win for Ground Zero Gaming would see the Sydney Drop Bears drop to the losers bracket final, where they would take on Mindfreak. And a lot of people expected this to be closer, considering the performance that Sydney Drop Bears put up against Ground Zero Gaming, but it doesn't go that way, unfortunately, and Mindfreak get a 3-0 victory, sweeping the losers bracket with 3-0 victories during their entire time in it. So that's very good for Mindfreak, but they did set up that match against Ground Zero Gaming in the grand final. This is an absolute barnstormer. It goes all 7 maps. Ground Zero Gaming, they went 2-0 down, brought it back to 2-2, went 3-2 up, and then Mindfreak bring it back and get a 4-3 victory over Ground Zero Gaming. Mindfreak are the Contenders 2020 Season 1 champions of Australia, and I think that is the first time ever that an underdog has won Contenders Australia. Also, I believe it is the first time that Mindfreak have won Contenders Australia. Also, I think that is the closest match in Australian Contenders history. So, a lot of things went on during that grand final, and it's a very interesting one to watch. It's a very interesting one to watch, and I do recommend taking a look at it. I did watch it myself. So, yeah, that's super interesting, but in this video we have one more region to look at. Of course, I couldn't leave this video without going over the Korean region, and this is super duper interesting. So, coming into this, O2 Blast would be the top dog Only just though, with World GameStar Phoenix coming in as the 2nd seed, T1, but Liquor, Element Mystic, Runaway in 6th, unbelievably, Gen G in 7th, and Lucky Future in 8th. So, in the quarterfinals, we saw O2 Blast taking on Lucky Future. This would be a 3-0 win for O2 Blast, no surprises there. And But Liquor would take on Element Mystic. This is a 3-2 win for But Liquor. They've really come through during this contender season in Korea, and they're upsetting some of the big names. So, this is a nasty loss for Element Mystic. But WGS Phoenix would take on Gen G. This would be a 3-1 win for WGS Phoenix. And T1 would take on Runaway. And it would be a 3-1 win for Runaway. So, in the losers bracket round 1, we saw Lucky Future taking on Element Mystic. And this would be a 3-0 win for Element Mystic. And this is really, really disappointing for this Lucky Future side. Because they've come into this Contenders Career season. They've spent a lot of money. And they've got a lot of Exile talent. And they've just not lived up to it whatsoever. So it's been a very disappointing season for Lucky Future. But Element Mystic would progress on. Gen G Esports would take on T1, and there'd be a narrow 3-2 win for Gen G Esports. Nothing to be ashamed of for T1 going out there though. In the winners bracket semi-finals, we saw O2 Blast taking on a But Liquor. This is again a really narrow match, but O2 Blast get through 3-2. But Liquor, great fight they put up there though. WGS Phoenix would take on Runaway. This would be a dominant 3-0 win for WGS Phoenix, so a bit of a kick for Runaway there. But WGS Phoenix have been a breakthrough team this season and have been really, really, really good. So nothing too out of the extraordinary there, if I was to say anything. And WGS Phoenix did actually win week 4 and come second to week 1. So they're not a bad team. In the losers bracket round 2, we saw Runaway versus Element Mystic. Cool, how many times have we seen that match? But this time, it would be a dominant 3-0 win for Runaway. Element Mystic are not quite what they were last season with their different roster now. And they're still kind of working out the kinks, as are Runaway in some respects. But yeah, it's not Element Mystic's playoffs run this time, and we'll see if they can do better in Season 2. But Liquor would take on Gen G Esports in the second game, and this would be a narrow 3-2 win for Liquor. And that's a big win over well, this is Seoul Dynasty's academy side, Gen G. And that's a big win for Liquor, and again, they are stomping their authority, this new team in Korea. But in the losers bracket round 3, they would take on Runaway. And that's where their time in the Korean playoffs would end, with Runaway getting a 3-0 victory over Liquor. And I think, didn't Liquor beat Runaway at one point? I can't remember. But yeah, that's a really good win for Runaway. In the winners bracket final, we saw O2 Blast taking on WGS Phoenix. O2 Blast would get the 3-0 win. O2 Blast looking like a really good team right now, as ever. And in the losers bracket final, WGS Phoenix would drop down and play Runaway once more. But this time, Runaway would say no. And this will be a 3-0 win for Runaway, completely the opposite to what happened in the winners bracket semi-final. So very, very interesting, but it did set up the grand final of O2 Blast versus Runaway, and we've seen so many matches like this: O2 Blast versus Runaway, Element Mystic versus Runaway, Element Mystic versus O2 Blast. We always get to see these really crazy matchups in Korea, and it's one of the few that are played on LAN at the moment as well, which is really, really interesting. But O2 Blast would get a 4-2 win over Runaway. It's a difficult one for Runaway to take, I think, because O2 Blast, I believe, took a 2-0 lead at halftime. No, it was a 1-0 lead, and then Runaway brought it back, went 2-1 up, and then O2 Blast win the next 3 maps and get the victory and take home the title of Contenders 2020 Season 1 Career Champions. O2 Blast back on top once more. So, super duper interesting, isn't it? And there's a little bit of extra money in Korean contenders. So O2 Blast would take home $20,000. Runaway would take home $9,000. World GameStar Phoenix would take home $5,200. And But Liquor would take on $4,800. But something I will say is there is prize money for every single team that reaches the playoffs stage of contenders at the moment. So that is a really awesome thing to see. But that is it for this one. That is 4 regions we've looked at. There are more regions to come. Remember, North America, China, Europe, they're all still to come, and they should be really, really interesting. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.